Wings. I'm your host, Kelli Strickland. Today, we are talking to another artist that is going to be our March guest artist here at the Weidner Center in our digital series. I'm talking to two of the four members of the band Pegasis, and they're going to be streaming a concert from Fort Howard Hall on March 18th. And this is a group that is local. They're from the Green Bay area. And in fact, Rissel, who is one of the members of the group, is an alumni of UW Green Bay, where the Weidner Center is located. As is the other member, actually, as it turns out. Matt Hillman is also an alumni of the UW Green Bay music program. I had heard Pegasis play a couple of times around town, and their sound is really striking for a few reasons. One, as we touch on in this conversation, they play all original music, and that is it's such a heavy lift, frankly, for artists to be generating all original material. The amount of effort and discipline, which we also talk a lot about in this conversation, that goes into that is so admirable. And I think we don't get to see it enough, especially in larger established performing arts centers. We often are seeing artists who are performing things that have kind of been in our conscious for a very long time. But this is a really fresh musical experience, and I just their music transports me. I think that's probably the best way to say it. So here it is, my conversation with two of the four members of Pegasis, who are going to be playing live stream from Fort Howard Hall on March 18th at 7 p.m. on our YouTube channel. I would love to hear from both of you kind of the origin story of Pegasis. How did this group come to be?
Matt, you want to go first?
I can, that's fine. At least from my perspective. Rissel and I met at UWGB while we were both attending there, and we sort of we formed a connection, like performing in different school things like the jazz band, and I would help out our professor Dr. Salerno, when he would do like the vocal jazz stuff. And I think the first time we ever performed together, it was a piece we were doing for jazz band, and Rissel actually wasn't even in the jazz band, but John had her sing on this tune, and that's the first time we ever met. And then after that, her and I started we started playing, like doing kind of jazz tunes together and stuff, and performing as a duo. And then her and her sisters and dad sort of asked me if I would jump into their group too and start accompanying them. So their father Roberto and me would play guitars behind the three of them singing, and they already had, as I'm sure Rissel will speak to, they've been performing together for way longer than I've been performing with them. But that's sort of the beginning of it from my perspective anyway. So Rissel maybe can jump in and explain previous stuff.
Yeah, so he basically said it all. I don't actually remember that song where I first met you. I'm sure it was really hard because John had us do it, then it was probably hard.
It
But
was that Chuck Loeb. It was that Chuck
oh, of
Loeb
course, it was Chuck
tune.
Loeb. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, my sisters and I have actually been singing for most of our lives. My parents had a music ministry in Dominican Republic where we were born, and we kind of brought it here. And we've always been touring around the area in churches, singing as like a family band sort of thing. And it wasn't until I met Matt where I realized, oh, okay, we could do a little bit more than what we were doing. So I tested it out with Matt. We had a jazz duo. Which was fun. And then I was like, well, maybe we can bring that in with my sisters. And then we started realizing really in 2016, okay, we can write some pretty good songs and kind of like use this as a driving force to make a career out of this. So that's kind of how that went. It really started off with us going to UWGB and meeting Matt.
So do you mind my asking how many years ago was this Dr. Salerno facilitated meeting?
That was that 14 maybe?
Was my first year, my second
Yeah,
year.
I think it was, I'm pretty sure it was 14. Yeah,
Oh, okay, yeah.
2014, something like that. Yeah. Yep.
Well, that's very cool. That kind of makes my heart feel warm that you're now coming back to perform this as part of our digital series back on your original stomping grounds and where you guys first met and started playing together. That's very cool.
Yeah.
I guess I knew, Rissel, that you were a UW Green Bay alum, but I didn't realize that the origin of the group actually, or Matt's kind of fusion into the family band that maybe pre-existed, that's where that stemmed from. So that's really neat. I'm very glad I asked.
Yes.
Go Phoenix. So can we talk a little bit more about specifically that experience of being in a family band? I mean, that's really, I feel like that's the stuff of television. You know, we see we see families that play together in that way. How did that, I guess, influence you, and what has it? How has it kind of formed your identity as an artist?
Yeah, so my dad is an ordained minister of the Seventh Adventist Church. So what we would do most of the time is he would be invited to preach. We would do a couple special songs in the morning service, and then in the afternoon we would provide a concert for the members of the church or any other visitor that would want to stop in. Um, that that experience being in a church in a religious setting has helped us kind of connect a little bit more to this whole human experience where music can be a part of of healing basically, which is really strange because I'm going to do a talk with Matt today at the Monty Center about music as healing. But it's sort of like this universal language that we can use, and it really we would sing these songs, these arrangements that we had, and we would see people crying because the song touched them in a certain way. And it's not something necessarily you would get out of, your popular music nowadays. It's just like we want our lyrics to reach as much as like how my father was preaching, these words that words really do mean something, that they can touch people. So that sort of family band dynamic kind of played into our lyricism.
That's interesting that your first experience, I think what I hear from a lot of young artists especially is that their first connection with the music is much more about self-expression. And what I hear you saying is that the thing that maybe impacted you first was the impact on others. And that notion of healing is so powerful. That's a really that's kind of coming to the form with a gravitas that I have to say I experience in your performance. I mean, as an audience member, I feel listening to you guys that I am in a communal experience with you. It's quite powerful. And that explanation, I think, sheds a lot of light on that. And that's not to say, that's when I hear you sing all kinds of songs, right? With not necessarily religious, but you bring that to the music. What about you, Matt? Where did your discovery of music? When did it happen? Who was there? How did
Sure.
it take shape?
Well, I was pretty young. I'm 39 now, but I started playing when I was about like 12 or 13. I think as a lot of people tend to like dabble in it at least like a little bit. And for me, it was a pretty instant connection. And I think it's more like what you were talking about, like a sense of self-expression. And but I also became very interested pretty early on the technique and technical aspects of playing too. And that really fueled my motivation and my practicing habits and things like that to try to maximize my technical prowess on the instrument. And I carried that throughout my life. And that was honestly, as much as being creative, it was also that, like the technical aspects and challenges of playing my instrument too, that sort of motivated me. And there were different musicians that influenced that I listened to in different years and things, but I always was driven to sort of be as disciplined as possible and like practicing and while at the same time attempting to write and things like that.
I want to come back to this idea of discipline and technique because it's such an important piece.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for especially non-musicians, really understanding what that means to the development of an artist. I'm not sure we talk about it enough. We tend to talk about the final product. But what instruments did you start out on?
It was guitar right away. I did play bass for a real short amount of time too, but it was mainly just guitar. Yeah.
So when I hear you talking about this attraction to the technical, discipline of just mastering the playing of an instrument, and it makes me think too about the vocals in Pegasus. You don't get that kind of result without tremendous discipline, right? That tightness of harmony, that absolute the clarity. And so what are your thoughts on where that comes from? I feel like the most frequently I've heard this conversation happen is around classical musicians, right? That you hear, classical prodigies are just like locked in practice rooms for 10 hours a day throughout their childhood. And sometimes a gift is recognized by teachers, by adults, and then it's kind of like delivered to a young artist. Like, this is what it takes, right? Get into this practice room. And it sounds to me like there was a discovery, or there was something in both of you that was really attracted to this and understood the importance of it, which is what most, especially kids left to their own devices, are not going to gravitate towards, right?
Yeah, for me, I teach private vocal and piano lessons, and one thing that I try and tell my students is everybody practices differently, and I personally don't believe in quantity of time of practice, like how long you practice. It's really how you're practicing in that time. You can have a better practice session in 60 minutes, even 35 minutes, than you can if you were to sit there for 5 hours. It just really depends on how you look at it. It's very much mental, a lot of mental practice, because the physical things are just going to come naturally. Anybody can play. It's how you think about it. That for me, that's something that I've come to realize. And when we put that into how my sisters and I perform, and we've just been doing this sort of harmonization, working with harmonies for most of our lives. Um, I think the reason we're able to do that is, one, we were exposed to it at an early age. My parents, we have a picture of me in my little afro with a mic that's really long because it's really old in church singing. Okay. That's our first, we were always kind of like in the music for the most part. But as music progresses and things get, I don't know how you would call it, but like processed, I guess you would say, in popular music, people tend to not pay attention to those underlying harmonies. It's really more like a catchy tune, a catchy phrase, and how does a person look? Not really so much as what are they doing with this music, like these harmonies in time, and how are you sensitive to that? I've seen a lot of people that I know that they listen to a lot of pop music, and then I show them this one, I don't know, like a choral piece or something, and then it doesn't like reach them. Where this choral piece is like this Morton Lauridsen piece. It's just like these lush harmonies, this choir, this mass group of people are singing these harmonies, and it's just like it doesn't touch them. And I think the reason that is because they aren't exposed to that sort of um, atmosphere of music early on in life. That's sort of how I think about that.
It also strikes me that you're right. I mean, I think that there is an attitude, especially in this digital landscape that we work in, where, people who are making things, and I'm all for everyone making things, make things, it's great.
Yes.
But the idea of like, I can fix it in post,
Yes.
So the kind of
Yes.
commitment and discipline that you're talking about, there's an attitude that it's just as good if it can be corrected by technology. And that choral piece that you're talking about, that's all about the human mastery of these skills, of this interpretation that, to your point, only comes from living in the music. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
I love that expression. What about you, Matt? What kind of kid were you that, you didn't have, you weren't being, propped up at the church with the music at the age of 3.
No.
So
Definitely not.
Where did your attraction to like, I just want to get very good at this come from?
I honestly do not know. I still would struggle to explain where that inner drive comes from to do that. Ever since I started, I just felt that I had to do that for some reason. And I can't really quantify what that is. Like I just felt more connected, I guess, to the instrument than I ever felt to like anything else I had done at that point. And no matter what else I did in school or whatever, I just felt this desire that's what I wanted to do. And that's what I felt like I was meant to do, I guess. And I wish I could answer that like more directly, but that's about all I could say, really.
I think that what I hear is not dissimilar to many artists, especially those who have chosen this path professionally, because the truth is it's such a hard career path that if you don't have that kind of compulsion, that I call it the artistic compulsion, you would go do something else.
Yep.
Because it is too hard. And I think that what you're describing, the connection with the instrument, it feeling more at home than anything else that you did, like not even being able to envision doing anything else is a really common story with working artists. Because, and I had an acting teacher when I was like 19, who just looked at our class on the first day and said, if you have any interest in doing anything else, go do it, because it's going to be easier than this.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's good advice.
And I think that, that bears out over the course of people's careers. It's like, okay, I'm going to try it for a while until I
Mm-hmm.
figure out what I need to get from this art form to kind of keep me in it. And for some people, it's not what you describe, right? Other
Yep.
people discover like, oh, I'm interested in many things.
Mm-hmm.
I could be happy or gratified doing many things. But I think that kind of singular connection to the form and to your relationship to it is a story that is common to those who are like, nope, this is it, man.
Mm-hmm.
Even though even though you have this like drive, Matt, I'm sure sometimes you felt like I have felt oh so many times where you're just like I I really can't do this today. Like I really don't enjoy this today. Like I really don't want to practice or I really don't want to do this. Honestly, sometimes I don't really don't want to do this gig. Like really like I don't want to do this right now. And I think that's sort of like this you get like highs and lows and then you get this plateau of like yeah, this is fine, this is doing okay and then you get like the deep dive where you're just like this is terrible and then suddenly you just come out okay, and you come out and you're growing as a musician, but you're also growing as a person because that's what music does, and it's a roller coaster, and I feel like Matt, don't you sometimes feel like that?
I definitely do. And what happens to me, you can only be creative for so long at a time for me. And I try not to force. I think you can try to force creativity, and that is somewhat of a mistake. For me, it is anyway. And I don't try to force those things. I kind of just um relinquish the fact that I'm not entirely in control of my own creativity. And when I feel like that, I go back to the technical things to try to get better just from a technical standpoint. And even that's hard. I agree with you. That can be hard to do on a daily basis. But for me, the mechanical, like technical things are what gets me through in between like plateaus and ups and downs and things like that. And but even that can be a struggle too, because sometimes you just don't want to do any of it, and that's the real reality of it. But you just
That's the job of it.
yeah,
You know
yeah,
what I
for
mean? I
sure.
mean,
Yep. Yep.
and you've drawn a really important distinction, I think, in that being creative is different than playing scales, right? Like
Yes.
Oh, yes.
they're
Yes.
two very different states of
Yep.
working, and they both have their place,
Mm-hmm.
in the career of a musician. But the study of the neuroscientific study of creativity is an area that I nerd out on a little bit. And there's so many interesting studies about how creativity is achieved, how a creative state is achieved, and how artists, when they're really pressed to describe how they get into those moments of flow. And yeah, it's a fascinating area. And I think you're right. Like, I'm sure as artists, you have some notion of like, okay, well, here are 3 factors I can control that I know will impact my ability to be creative. But then there's like 5 that I have no control over.
Yes.
And that's just, then you're just sitting waiting for the muse to show up.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So there's one Pegasus has such a distinct sound, and I I'm so I'm very excited about being able to share that sound with people in this digital platform. Now, you know, it can't replace the live experience. We know this, right? We've been doing all kinds of digital programs, and some of
Mm-hmm.
them quite successful, but it doesn't replace that live experience. In addition to the actual sound, you all are really committed to original music. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can go first. So it's been hard for me personally to connect deeply to music that I haven't written, there's there's a certain level that you can get to. Like you can connect to, let's say, for example, I don't know. Oh, I don't like this example, but I'm gonna have to use it. Hallelujah. Okay, okay. It's definitely not a song about hallelujah. Okay, we all know what the song's about. Okay, but there's only so much you can get to connecting with that as a performing musician. There's only so much you can change of it, so that because the every audience knows what that song sounds like, and they expect to hear what that song sounds like. And if you change it, holy man, watch out! You're gonna get some, some bad reviews, whatever. Um, but if it's a song that you wrote and it's a song that is Pegasus and it's a song that you have yourself behind it, you take away that factor of, well, this is supposed to sound like this. Why doesn't it sound like this? Why doesn't this sound like this? And I think that's what makes it more, I don't know, more gratifying for me to perform my own music because it's mine. I don't have to make sure that it has to sound like how somebody else did it in order to um I don't know, placate the crowd, but instead I'm giving this audience something new, something that they can, their ears going to perk up and be like, "Oh, I didn't know that I liked this type of music like this. Oh, wow, these lyrics are really cool. Like I've never heard those words together." Or like, "Wow, this is like a different genre. Is this even a genre? Like this is like way out there." And you can do so much more. And then when you're performing it, it's yours. You can just expand on that, and like the universe like literally opens up. Like if you were to close your eyes and you're performing, you literally feel the energy in the room just opening up, because this is something that you wrote to express to other people and they heard it, and that originated inside your head, which is like really crazy to think, because like it was in here and now it's like out there and now they're like hearing it, and you put it. Oh, Matt and I had a conversation about this the other day. It was just, ooh, it's mind blowing. That's really the greatest thing. It's like they heard this. It was in my own head, and now they get to hear that too, and how I can like expand on this idea.
Yeah.
And for me, covers and doing other people's music was always just more of a means to an end, which means it was a way to make money. And throughout my, adolescence and younger adulthood, I had to play in many different scenarios where you're playing other people's songs. And that's in general, that's what people tend to want to hear, is something they know. But as artists, it's much more gratifying to be able to express what's inside of you, and is the culmination of all the technical work plus the creative work at the same time. And that's what I feel like our stuff is at least from my end of things. It's not only creative, but it's the technical thing too. It's all rolled up into one in this just kind of massive self-expression and display of all that work that you do that people don't see, basically. And so for me, being able to display something that was created from nothing sort of is much more gratifying. And another aspect is, Rissel touched on it, is that to me, songs that you create are sort of a living, breathing thing that constantly evolves. So the more you play them, they can tend to morph and change over time, and sort of it's almost like a living thing, like I said. And that aspect, I don't think you get that from doing like covering other people's music. So
Yeah, what both of you said has made me think of so many things. I mean, Rissel, when you were talking about having to deal with audience expectations, right, based on having experiences with a piece of music before they walked into that space with you, you can't help but then be either competing or
I would say
being
feeling a little
compared to,
trapped.
to that other experience. Whereas, and I think what you're describing as like the ideal situation with an audience very much aligns with what I'm always thinking about, which is we're all at our best in terms of artist and audience when we have no expectations, because that means we're completely open,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
unfortunately, I experience all the time in the world of arts marketing. It's just, to your point, Matt, it's much easier to sell a ticket to a known quantity. And
Yep.
that's so frustrating, because I'm always trying to think like, how do we convince arts goers that the best kind of, or at least a part of who they can be as an arts goer, is one who places value on the newness, the new experience, right? That in and of itself. And I say this all the time when I'm talking to people about, come try this, just check this out. No, I don't have easy marketing buzzwords to tell you exactly what this experience is going to be, but I want you to just trust that the experience of encountering something entirely new, that's worth the price of admission, right? You could, at the end of it, go, not my cup of tea. Or like, holy moly, I had no idea that music could sound like that, or that humans could make those noises.
Yes.
And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're then in a lifelong relationship with that song or that artist, but it's about you as the evolution of a person, just expanding your the breadth of experience and artistic vision that you have been in again, that word like commune with, that you've left yourself open to. I have to imagine, though, to my earlier point about like selling tickets, it is a harder road, isn't it? I mean, to really hold that line of like, no, we perform Pegasis music. That's what we perform. Talk to me about that challenge.
Well, I think of it this way. Earth, Wind, and Fire said the same thing. We perform Earth, Wind, and Fire music. Okay. Whoever else out there that wrote their own music, they said the same thing. We perform our own music. Yes, they do a couple covers a couple times, in those smaller gigs. But for the most part, when you hear Earth, Wind, and Fire, and I'm not comparing Pegasus to Earth, Wind, and Fire, but I'm just trying to use this as an example. When you hear Earth, Wind, and Fire,
I say go ahead and make that comparison.
you know it's Earth, Wind, and Fire. There is no question about it. You know it's Steely Dan. Okay, you know that is Steely Dan. So why is it so hard for people of this age to hear that? Like, we're only going to do, especially people who are like hiring us to play at their events, like, can you do some covers for some whatever? But we do Pegasus music because this is what you hired us to do. So it's almost like they don't realize that that's how music started. It wasn't the covers. It started with the original music. Every cover that you hear now, that was an original music. Everyone, oh, this version of this version of that. That was an original song, which was then, transformed throughout the years. But what we're doing is we're starting over. We're starting over that process. And this is why we're trying to get people to listen to original music as much as they can, because original music kind of sounds like singer-songwriter-y, I'm kind of doing this, just for fun, whatever. No, there are people who are writing original music as a career, okay? So like really pay attention to that. All the Earth, Wind, and Fire songs that you have heard, that is Earth, Wind, and Fire. That's how they marketed it. And that's how we want to make sure that, and trust me, it's really hard to convince people that, our music isn't, we don't just write this in our basement, okay? Our studio isn't in a basement, but you know what I'm saying? Like, we don't just do this for fun on the weekends. Like, this is our life. Like, this is our livelihood. So I don't know. I think it's just going to be difficult no matter what until something changes in the music industry where not everything is like, you know, mass produced and whatever. But if we start by taking a stand and just saying like, well, we're Pegasus and this is written by Pegasus and we're going to sing Pegasus. So I hope that you enjoy. And if you don't, that's okay too, but share it anyways.
I
Well,
think another
go ahead, Matt.
I think another problem that we actually run into and deal with is that we're hard to like pin down like genre wise, and there's nothing to really compare to us like as far as they sound like this or that, and that creates its own issues as well.
Because you can't market it basically.
Yeah, you
say,
can't
"This
go,
is a
well, they
funk
sound
group."
yeah, they sound like this or that, or that becomes sort of problematic when you're trying to like the marketing aspect of it too.
Yeah, it's yeah, I feel you. And you know, from our perspective, like we always look at it like how, you know, and this is a terrible formula, but this is the formula that most people in my position have to use. It's like, well, how many tickets do I have to sell to make this work? And at a certain number of tickets, it's like, I know the only way I'm going to get that number of tickets sold is if there are enough people who sort of have confidence and already understand the product, right? And that goes to your point about covers, which is why these kind of more intimate experiences, in the hope that, you know, building an audience so that, you know, region by region, area by area, people then start to say like, oh no, that's Pegasus music. I understand what Pegasus music is. But that it's a hard road. And I just want to share my immense admiration and appreciation for the kind of integrity that takes from an artist to just stand that ground, because it's hard to do, but it shows such vision. It shows such, as I said, artistic integrity. I mean, all of the things that I really admire in the artists that I love most. So keep hoeing that road, man. That's but I see you. Yes. Well, I want to thank you both for spending just a little bit of time with us to get to know you better. And I'm hoping that our upcoming concert is the beginning of a relationship, and that we can find more ways to share your music with our audiences, because I personally just so greatly enjoy your sound.
Oh, thank you.
We
Thank
really
you so
appreciate that.
Us.
Yeah, and we hopefully we can continue a relationship and continue to do things together for sure.
Yeah, indeed. All right. Matt, Rissel, thank you very much. And go give that good talk about music and healing.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
There you have it. That's my conversation with 50% of Pegasus. You can learn more about their upcoming concert at our website, weidnercenter.com, or by just going straight to our YouTube channel. And you can set yourself a little reminder about the concert, so when it comes time for the stream, you'll be reminded. You could subscribe to our YouTube channel while you're there. We put lots of content, as they say, out on that channel. And thanks for joining us again. Bird in the Wings is a production of Phoenix Studios at the University of Wisconsin, Green Bay. Phoenix Studios executive producer is Ryan Martin, and the production manager is Kate Farley. The editor for this episode is our Weidner Center, Peep Florencio. Thank you, Florencio. And our graphic designer is Kimberly Vlayas. Our music was written and performed by Noah Simon. If you haven't already, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast platform. You can also head over to our website at uwgb.edu/podcasts, plural, to check out past episodes of this and all of our shows. I'm your host, Kelli Strickland. Thanks for listening.